everyone! So over the past few months you may have seen a couple of videos go up on my channel in which I styled the ancient Greek goddesses for modern day aesthetics, so turned say Aphrodite or Thetas into wearable outfits that you can wear in the 21st century, or at least I would. They were based on my wardrobe, and gave you a little bit of information about those goddesses and why I picked the outfits that I picked. So on those videos I actually had a number of requests that I film a video where I recommend books based on the goddesses. An idea I absolutely love and have thought about doing something similar to it in the past and think it just goes along perfectly with those videos. So that's what I'm here to do today. I'm going to recommend you a selection of books based on ancient Greek goddesses and what they represent and the kind of gods that they were. So without further ado, let's crack straight on. I'm going to start off this video with Aphrodite. Now Aphrodite was the ancient Greek goddess of love and beauty, and particularly kind of like sensual, lustful love. And Aphrodite is actually one of my absolute favourite goddesses. I love the stories about her, I love her character and what she brings to a lot of the myths. So of course for Aphrodite I could have picked a ton of romance novels. It had to be something romantic. It had to, I felt, be something with a little bit of sex in there, a little bit sexy, and I decided in the end to go for Nama's Kiss by Jacqueline Carey, despite having many to pick from. And the reason I love Nama's Kiss is that it actually sort of goes beyond Aphrodite herself and encompasses so much love and sensuality, because it follows a young woman of mixed race heritage whose father she hasn't grown up with. She's never known her father, but her father was a priest of Nama, and Nama is a goddess of sexuality and love and all of those elements in her own right. And our protagonist decides to go off into the world after having grown up in seclusion with her mother to explore this side of herself and this part of her heritage and find out her own affinity with the goddess Nama. The story and the characters in this book embrace sort of bisexuality, pansexuality. Nobody's sexuality is actually defined using modern terms, but even our main character's relationships with both women and men, and it's all represented so positively, so beautifully, and completely goes against something that I find all too commonly within fantasy, which often tends towards depicting sexual violence a lot more graphically than it depicts consensual and loving sexual encounters, which I think is really unfortunate. But Jacqueline Carey does not go in for that in this series and in this book, and that's something I think is beautiful. It's got a lot of story and mystery and mythos around the whole world and the whole world building of the different gods and the goddesses, which I love. And then it also just has this really positive depiction of a woman's journey and all of the relationships she has. It's not just about her one relationship with one person, it's about her different encounters and her different love stories with different people at different times in her life. And I think for me that encompasses what Aphrodite represents, and I really enjoy that. And I think that this book is just beautifully written, such gorgeous imagery. There is a lot of plot and a lot of meat to the story beyond those sexual aspects, but it is also something that is heavily part of the plot in the world, and I think that that's lovely. And I really love this book. It's one that I really want to reread because it's been quite a few years since I first picked it up, but would definitely recommend to Aphrodite if I were to meet her. Next up, however, I'd like to recommend a book based on, or two, Thetas. So Thetas was a goddess of the sea. She was also potentially most famous for being the mother of Achilles in terms of actual ancient Greek mythology. Her marriage to Peleus, Achilles' father, was the last ever marriage between a mortal and a god. It was the same wedding at which Eris turned up at and threw the golden apple, and the whole Trojan War affair stemmed. So Thetas is actually in the background of a lot of myth, and although I don't think she's maybe one of the better known goddesses. And for Thetas I really want to recommend to you The Grace Keepers by Kirsty Logan. So The Grace Keepers is a book that is very connected to the sea. So The Grace Keepers I would consider falls most closely into the category of magic realism. It's set in a world where the land has flooded. There are only now small island communities where people can live, and then the rest of society lives on boats because most of the world is now sea. I mean, most of the world is sea, but even more of the world is sea, and there's not these great big land masses like we're familiar with. And we follow two main characters. One of our protagonists lives on a circus boat, and she is a bear trainer, and she performs with her bear on this travelling sea-bound circus. And then we also have a young woman who is a gracekeeper, and she is responsible for sending the dead off into the afterlife based on their sort of water grave practices in this world. There is also a pregnancy in this book, there's also interactions with potential mermen in this book, and there's also a queer romance. And a lot of these elements, like the pregnancy and the merfolk, sort of again make me think of Thetas and certain elements of her story beyond even just that association with the sea. It's a beautiful atmospheric story that very much feels like a modern folk tale, and that is something that Kirsty Logan is particularly skilled at. My next book recommendation is based on Artemis, however. So Artemis was the goddess of the hunt. She was one of the three virgin Olympian goddesses alongside Hestia and Athena, and she was also the goddess of girlhood. Rather than spend her days on Olympus like a lot of the other gods, she liked to live in the forest, go hunting, spend time with other women that made up her sort of community that she spent her time in. She shunned men, and in terms of actual ancient Greek life, a lot of young girls would participate in the temples and the festivals and the rituals of Artemis at a young age before they became sort of marriageable, as was considered. And for those reasons I had to recommend Lumberjanes. So Lumberjanes is actually a comic book series, and it's a little bit on the nose because there are references to Greek mythology in this one. It's the only one in this video which has direct references to Greek mythology in it, but there was no other better book for this goddess. It had to be Lumberjanes. Lumberjanes is a comic book series that very much can be read by children, by teens, and by adults. It probably most easily falls into middle grade, but it has so much to offer and so much humour that I definitely think adults will enjoy it, like I did, but it's also quite wholesome. It is also beautifully illustrated. It has the cutest, most adorable illustrations. It's about a group of girls at a summer camp, a little bit like the Scouts or the Brownies, which are called Lumberjanes. So these young girls are all known as Lumberjanes, and they're Lumberjanes summer camp where they're learning to, you know, build fires and survive in the wilderness and participate in team building exercises and make friends. However, nothing is ever as simple as it seems, because it actually appears that there might be a potentially paranormal, magical danger lurking somewhere in those woods. It's not scary, however, it's very cute, very exciting, mysterious but fun, and I absolutely love it. And I love the little friendship group there between all the girls. It's so fun, like I said, so wholesome but so entertaining, and it has to be my pick for Artemis. Next up is a lot of people's favourite goddesses, I get the impression, and that is Athena. Now, Athena is probably most widely known as goddess of wisdom, I feel, in popular culture these days, but she was also very, very prominently a goddess of war in antiquity. She was a goddess of war as well as strategy and victory. And for that reason I decided to go for the Harp of Kings by Juliet Marillier. Now, the reason I decided to pick this book is twofold. First of all, we do have three protagonists in this book. We have two male protagonists and one female protagonist, but at the same time it always felt like it was about that female protagonist for me. She felt like the main character, and she is a female warrior. She is training to become a warrior alongside our other two protagonists at Swan Island, which is an island where people go to train to become warriors. It's set in a version of medieval Ireland that Juliet Marillier has created with these fantastical elements. There are fair folk in there, but our protagonists are usually mortals, or at least most closely tied to the mortal realm, and their abilities are very much tied to the mundane. So we have a female warrior. She's not magical, but she is strong and she is cunning, and she has to undertake a spying mission in this book alongside her two other companions, which are her brother and a young man that she begins having quite an antagonistic relationship with, but they build a friendship as they sort of experience the world together and have to go on this mission together. Juliet Marillier just writes the most stunning sort of literary historical fantasy, I would describe it as. Beautiful, beautiful writing, which I also feel that Athena would very much appreciate. And our protagonist is actually the daughter of a character from another series by Juliet Marillier, the Blackthorn and Grimm series, and there's something about Blackthorn that also gives me slight Athena vibes because she's this wise older woman. So this association between wisdom as well, I feel like, comes through in Harp of Kings, and I just felt like, yeah, Athena would would read that book and enjoy it. We then have Hecate. So Hecate was the ancient Greek goddess of magic and witchcraft. So of course I had to pick a witchy book. Now, I've read quite a few witchy books and there's a lot of popular witchy books out there, so this one was a little bit harder to narrow down than some of the others where the answer just seemed to jump out at me, or I actually found more tricky to find a book for. And in this instance, I just decided to go for one of my favourite witchy books, and that is Hecate Warrior. So Hecate Warrior is the first in a young adult series by Nnedi Okorafor, and draws entirely on a culture and draws entirely on a culture separate to that of ancient Greece, which is African ideas of witchcraft and cultural symbolism of witchcraft in African, particularly Nigerian society, because this book is set in Nigeria. It's about Sunny, who is an albino girl that recently moved back to Nigeria. She grew up her first few years in America with her parents, who are originally from Nigeria, and her brothers, her older brothers, were also born in Nigeria, but they lived in America for a while. Now they're back in Nigeria, and Sunny, it turns out, is a leopard person. So leopard people are what witches are known as in their culture. So now that she's back in Nigeria, that she's discovered this affinity for magic, she has also met a whole community of leopard people in her hometown who are willing to train her and teach her alongside some other young people that become her sort of like classmates. There's 4 of them, 2 boys and 2 girls, all of whom are training to be sort of fully fledged members of leopard people society. And I particularly like that it's a book about becoming a leopard person and training in witchcraft in those early days in that journey, and sort of learning about that affinity with the main character. So that was why I decided to go for this one for Hecate. Then last but not least, I wanted to recommend a book to Hera, who was goddess of many things, as they all are. She was married to Zeus, who was king of the gods. She was also goddess of marriage and motherhood and fertility, and I decided to go for this one with Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. Now, the reason I felt this one was appropriate is just because of a lot of the themes that are a part of this book, because motherhood and relationships and trust within relationships and fertility issues are major plot points in this book. So this is a book that's set in 1980s Nigeria, and it's about a young couple who have sort of been pressured by the husband's family to take a second wife. So we have our wife, we have our husband, and now a second wife that is brought into their family because they have yet been unable to bear a child. So the hope is that a second wife will also mean a child, but it is a point of contention between them because it's not something that they ever planned to do or wanted to do. It is something that wasn't uncommon amongst the people they know and their culture and their history, but it was something they never planned to do. They wanted to have a monogamous relationship until they're sort of pressured, like I said, by their family. However, this is a book of twists and turns, and it always goes in directions that you don't expect it to go in, so it's a lot more than that initial premise. There's so much to this book about relationships, about communication, about trust, about motherhood and the sort of meaning of parenthood and of marriage and all of those intricacies that I just felt like it made perfect sense for the sort of dominion of Hera. And those are the 6 books I want to recommend based on goddesses in this video. If you would like to see a second installment of this, there are plenty more ancient Greek goddesses. You can even let me know which goddesses you'd like me to recommend a book to. Then let me know in the comments down below. You can also check out my videos where I dressed up as the different goddesses. I will link those down below in the description box, as well as my playlist of sort of classical related videos in case that's something that's up your street. But until then, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you would recommend something different to any of these goddesses, and I will see you all again in the next one. Bye everyone!